Damn! You bastard! The scream, filled with anguish yet an equal sense of anger, boomed through the world filled with heaps of metal and garbage as a figure rolled on the ground, quickly scrambling back up with an impressive jump. On his gloved hands, one could see a rusty knife blade, but if one looked from behind, one would see a piece of torn jeans dangling. Thump, thump, thump. The sound of heavy stomping echoed through the garbage area, and soon a creature appeared in the light, right where the knife pointed. It was a rat, except it stood around the height of a 5-year-old child, with whiskers that glinted in the orange light of the setting sun. Its fur was like steel, though covered in dirt and strange mucus. Dragging along the ground were razor-sharp claws, which seemed more than capable of ripping a man's arm from his shoulder. This was an E-grade mutated metallic sewage rat, one of the apex predators of the garbage area of Sector E. Shit! Talk about bad luck! Ryuk cursed under his breath as his shaky hands pointed the blade at the creature, which had stopped to fix him with a deadly stare. He'd been going about his business of harvesting cores from smaller creatures and was just about done for the day, heading home, when he unknowingly stepped on the butt of this creature, waking it from its slumber. And that was how he had been embroiled in this running battle, a battle he just couldn't seem to win. Not only was the rat faster than him, but it was also relentless, chasing him without pause. There was only one thing he could do if he didn't want to go home without his butt, and that was to face this bastard head-on. But gods be damned, he had never fought a creature this big in his life. While he was confident in his evasion skills, he doubted that the rusty blade in his hands, specially made for harvesting cores, could even pierce the rat's thick, steel-like fur. The heavens just had to pick today of all days to tease him. Yet, as absurd as the thought was, Ryuk knew that if he managed to kill the rat, he could harvest its core, which would undoubtedly sell for 3 times the value of the cores he'd collected throughout the day. This was a big bag of cash standing right in front of him. At that thought, his mismatched crimson red and blue eyes flashed with a shocking, greedy light that dimmed just as quickly as it came. Hey you! I know you can understand me. Today, I'm feeling magnanimous, and out of infinite mercy, I'll allow you to go back to sleep. You can call it your lucky day. What do you say, huh? Ryuk asked as the creature turned its crimson eyes toward him. For a second, its gaze paused as if in thought, but then it quickly flashed with murderous intent as it suddenly swiped its claws to the side. Clang! The sound of metal clashing resounded, and a figure was sent reeling backward, slamming into a heap of metallic garbage that halted his movement. Shit! I almost got it! Ryuk thought to himself as he glanced toward the rat, which let out a powerful screech before scurrying toward him again. He wasn't foolish or naive enough to believe that a wild, mutated creature would let him off alive. More importantly, he couldn't leave behind the pile of cash the gods had delivered to him. Today, he would kill this creature and fill his pockets. Bong! The metallic heap gave way as the rat's claws crashed into it, but it didn't feel the expected flesh. Turning its gaze to the side, it found its prey, a fresh claw mark running down the side of his face. I can evade its strikes as long as I see them coming. The cores of creatures like this aren't in their hearts like normal ones. They're in their heads. Well, at least that's what I learned from Uncle Bob's manual. Lucky for me, its eyes are also the only place not covered by that steely fur. Piercing through them would be easier, and if I aim hard enough, I should shake its core. That should be enough to send it to the Shadow Realm. I can win, Ryuk analyzed, and in the next instant, he sprinted toward the creature just as it sprinted toward him. The rat was stunned for a moment, shocked to see its prey advancing with such confidence. It paused for a split second before erupting into a full-speed run toward Ryuk. 3 meters apart, it leaped high into the air, its massive shadow engulfing Ryuk as its sharp teeth bared at him, aiming for his head. But at the last second, Ryuk slid to the ground, dodging the sharp teeth by mere inches as the creature crashed into the ground with a loud thump. Immediately, a rustle of air blew by the rat's side as it swiped its claws, expecting to meet the rusty knife. Instead, its hand collided with nothing but a heap of metal. It was a fake ambush. Its gaze snapped to the other side, only to find the edge of Ryuk's blade mere inches away. Puuuuucchhii. Sir. The sound of steel piercing something soft resounded as the rat let out a painful screech. The blade was buried halfway through its eye, and its wielder was none other than the prey it had been chasing. In blind fury, it slashed its second claw toward Ryuk's left arm. The claws sliced through it like butter, drawing a painful grunt from Ryuk as he staggered backward, clutching his injured hand. But just when it seemed like Ryuk was retreating in pain, he suddenly lunged forward. His two legs slammed into the hilt of the knife, driving it entirely through the rat's eye. Bang! Droop! Droop! Silence. The heavy sound of something collapsing was followed by two knees hitting the ground. Then silence. My greed would be the end of me one day. Ryuk cursed to himself as he looked at his left arm. Right now, there was nothing but a stump. But instead of massive amounts of blood dripping from it, what shocked Ryuk was the fact that there were only electric sparks and heaps of severed metal. His arm, it was robotic. This was something Ryuk had absolutely no idea about. To think his hand was actually metallic. No wonder he had felt like his hands were stronger than normal. Something he had noticed after mistakenly snapping the hands of a thief who had tried to rob him of his cores one fateful day. But if his hand was metallic, then there could only be one person responsible for that. Seems like Uncle Bob has a lot of explaining to do today, Ryuk thought to himself as he tore his attention away from his hands. His eyes lit up brilliantly as they landed on the carcass of the rat. In the end, he had managed to kill it. This rat was a true mutated creature, and its core sold for hundreds of star coins. This was an absolute treasure. Immediately, Ryuk's remaining right hand gripped the hilt of his knife, buried in the rat's eye. With a grunt, the knife tore upward, severing the creature's skull entirely. Clang! The sound of something metallic clashing on the ground echoed, drawing Ryuk's eyes to the ball of scrap that had fallen from the creature's skull. He rushed to it, pulling the bloody flesh off and revealing a brilliant red light that shone across the world. It was a circular ball, seemingly made of metal. Within, one could see brilliant shining motes of light resembling fireflies trapped in a jar. The object exuded a mysterious aura that numbed Ryuk for a few seconds before he quickly snapped out of the trance. A big smile curved up his lips, the core of an enhanced mutant beast E-grade. All his life, Ryuk had only hunted feral beasts F-grade and had been prevented from hunting E-grade beasts by his uncle, something Ryuk deemed stupid since he believed he was just as strong as the E-grade beasts. And they sold for much more than the feral-grade beasts. But this time, he had an excuse that might let his uncle cut him some slack. Turning to look into the dark space up above, he saw the orange light of the sun that was slowly dimming. Instantly, Ryuk's eyes flashed as he grabbed the core off the ground and moved toward his bag at the side. Opening it up, he saw a small pile of cores inside. Quickly, he tossed the core into it before scurrying away from the garbage island. There were rumors that at night, dominant beasts, D-grade, the absolute terrors of Sector E, came out to hunt. Their power was enough to chill even greedy ones like Ryuk himself, so he knew he needed to leave the place as quickly as possible, or he would be doomed. Besides, Uncle Bob would already have started worrying by now. A little more than an hour's walk later, Ryuk found himself exiting the metallic wasteland as he arrived outside the rusty iron door. Beside it was a small building where people dressed in shabby, torn clothing could be seen moving in and out, most of them holding bags that jingled with the sound of coins while delivering boastful laughter. They were just like him, sewage core hunters. It was a dangerous job, one where over 70% of hunters would be out of the business within 3 years, either dead or rendered immobile, but it was undeniably rewarding. Ryuk walked through the doors. The familiar smell of sweat and alcohol lingered in the air, and his cold eyes scanned the room, quickly settling on a corner table where an old man could be seen smoking a pipe. Ryuk received a quick glance due to his severed arm, which was still sparking with electricity. But it wasn't shocking that his arm was robotic. Even in this room, there were more than enough men who had their body parts replaced with robotic components. In this place, the more robotic parts a hunter had, the more experienced they were thought to be. Those with no robotic parts were either amateurs or cowards who dared not challenge more powerful beasts. Ignoring the gazes, he moved to the side table where the old man, eyes closed, puffed on his smoke stick with a stiff expression, occasionally nodding his head as if listening to music. Ryuk only rolled his eyes before slamming his bag onto the table with a loud bang, enough to make the man open his bloodshot eyes filled with streaming red veins. Got another pile of garbage to exchange? Ryuk? The man's thick voice boomed through the air, white smoke slamming onto Ryuk's face. His eyebrows quivered a little. As much as he had been around smoking, he absolutely hated the smell of it. Still, he didn't have time to complain. You exchanging or not? Ryuk asked, looking at the man with an uninterested, curved lip. And what if I say I'm not? The man smiled tauntingly as he took a long drag from his smoke stick, exhaling the entire cloud onto Ryuk's face, watching curiously as a vein popped on Ryuk's forehead. Then I'll find someone else whose eyes haven't been replaced by scraps of metal blinding them from seeing a true treasure, Ryuk explained with a mocking smile. The man's eyes flashed with a hint of anger, but quickly settled as he looked at the dirty bag Ryuk had placed in front of him. A true treasure, my ass. This is nothing more than a bag of the shabbiest cores, selling for just 50-star coins. Something barely enough to fill my cigarettes for 2 days. And you call it a treasure? Jack asked mockingly. Of course, this wasn't his first time exchanging cores with Ryuk. Sometimes even Jack was shocked by how much value the brat placed on trash. Not completely worthless, but calling a pile of E-grade cores a treasure was plain delusion. What about this, then? Ryuk dipped his hand into the bag and brought out the core. Immediately, the brilliant light flashed through the room, turning a few heads toward Ryuk. Quickly, Jack snatched the ball from Ryuk's hand, stuffing it into the drawer before anyone could get a good look. He stared at Ryuk with a mix of shock and suspicion. So what do you say, Blind Jack? You exchanging or not? You surprised me, kid. Now I understand the reason for your missing arm, Jack said, looking at Ryuk's severed left arm. Here, you can have it, Jack said as he dipped his hand into his drawer and brought out exactly 3 bags of coins. A brilliant light flashed through Ryuk's eyes. These weren't simple 50-star coin bags. Each bag contained 100 coins, and there were 3 of them. This was equivalent to almost an entire week's pay for hunting cores. But just as quickly, the greedy light faded from Ryuk's eyes. Add 1 more bag, and I'll consider it a deal, Ryuk said, looking into Jack's furrowed eyes. A quick smile settled on Jack's face. Then forget the deal. Go do it with someone else, Jack said, dipping his hand into the drawer where he'd kept the core. Before Jack could secure the core and return it, Ryuk snatched the 3 bags off the table, turned his back, and headed out while muttering, "Stingy old bastard. Tell old Bob I said hello, bloody mutt," Jack called out behind him. Ryuk gave a simple nod and continued on his way. And also, remember to tell old Bob to help patch up your trousers after patching up your arm. Jack roared with mockery, drawing laughter from everyone in the area. Only then did Ryuk realize his butt was actually on display for everyone to see. His face turned bright red as he hurried away from the crowd. Damn! He cursed, sprinting away with a flushed face and disappearing down the dusty road. The road was dusty, mixed with patches of what seemed to have once been tarred. But the asphalt had eroded so much it was barely visible, almost as if the entire road had been blown apart. Rectangular buildings lined the road, made from metallic structures with slits carved into them as windows. Some men sat outside their metallic tents, as Uncle Bob loved to call them, bottles of alcohol in hand. Others were engaged in fistfights, rolling on the bloodied ground amidst curses and snorts. This was life in the lowest grade city of Enderth. This was Ryuk's home, the only place he had ever known. There were barely any kids his age around here, which made sense given the low population of women. Only men inhabited this grade E city, which acted as a kind of prison, and even though Ryuk had seen a couple of women before, they usually don't last long here, choosing to move upside where it was said to be better. Majority of people here are those who committed heinous crimes in other cities choosing to flee here to avoid capture. and eventually settling down to become scrap hunters. It was a dull world of smoke, alcohol, and metal. Everything a man with nothing left to lose needed to survive. How Ryuk had been born here, he had no idea. Uncle Bob rarely talked about the past. He was a man of few words, he only spoke when necessary. His favorite saying was, "A true man should either have something to say or keep quiet." It wasn't a philosophy Ryuk found particularly inspiring. As Ryuk walked, the road gradually inclined, as though leading to a hill. The metallic tents grew fewer and fewer. Uncle Bob was a peculiar man, choosing to live far from the main settlement behind the hill. Ryuk was already used to the place, walking along the path with ease. The clinking of coins in his pocket served as his music. Unknowingly, he began to hum a tune. What better music was there than the sound of jingling coins in one's pocket? Today, Ryuk felt alive. Despite the danger of fighting E-grade mutant beasts, he had earned enough money to ensure they could have more food on the table than usual. Uncle Bob would scold him for taking the risk but would also be proud of the young warrior he had raised. "I need to get home quicker," Ryuk thought, his steps quickening. However, his face changed drastically as he neared the top of the hill. There was a burnt smell in the air, and out of the corner of his eye, he saw billowing dark flames rising in the direction of his settlement. There was only one place it could be. "Uncle Bob," Ryuk muttered, then sprinted forward like a maddened beast. The path uphill grew steeper, but Ryuk defied gravity, his body moving with fervor and power. Finally, he reached the summit and looked down. Where hundreds of metallic tents had once stood, there was now only a vast field of ash. Only a single building remained standing. His settlement had been destroyed, burned to the ground. An ear-defeating screech sent powerful shockwaves rippling through the area. It boomed out as Ryuk struggled to keep his eyes open amidst the powerful, blowing storm. Quickly, they widened when he barely caught sight of a gigantic dark creature suddenly rising into the air and flashing toward the sky. Its wings were so big that Ryuk was as tall as only a single feather in the bird's body, showing how truly gargantuan its entire form was. Its feathers were pitch black, and it radiated a powerful, smoky aura that billowed with strange, flame-like tendrils. "What the hell is that?" Ryuk screamed, shielding himself in shock as he watched the bird disappear. The last thing imprinted in his mind was the bird's billowing shadowy eyes and the strange runic lines carved into them. Quickly, however, Ryuk abandoned the thought as he sprinted downward toward the hill, running toward the only building still standing. As he walked on the ground, the sound of scorching could be heard. His slippers burned through from the intense heat, and even the palms of his legs were seared. Yet he wouldn't feel pain at all. It was as though he couldn't even be bothered to pay it any attention. The closer he advanced toward the singular building still standing, the more tears unknowingly escaped his blue eyes as he passed by many buildings and corpses that had been reduced to ashes. "Uncle Bob! Uncle Bob!" Ryuk screamed as he arrived in the area and quickly entered the building. What he failed to take note of was the fact that this building was the only one still standing among the heaps of burned-down structures in the area. Immediately, Ryuk appeared before the door, finding it barely hanging off its hinges. Without hesitation, he barged in, knocking it down and scurrying deep inside. Looking around the room, there wasn't much to be seen. It was a simple space, filled with chairs and a small table, along with some clothes and a bed, at least in Ryuk's imagination, as the entire place had been completely burned down. "Uncle Bob! Uncle Bob! Where are you?" Ryuk roared in anger as he scanned the area, finding nothing. He was just about to sprint outside to continue searching when a voice echoed in his head. "Look to the ground, bloody mutt." "Uncle Bob?" Ryuk's eyes widened, understanding the voice as he turned his head beneath him, and immediately, his jaw dropped to the ground. Beneath him was what seemed to be a bunker area, one he had never seen before. There was a door, a glass door that led to the ground. "Open it and come in, bloody mutt." The voice called out to him once more. Without wasting a second, Ryuk turned the knob on the door in the ground and slowly peeked his head through. Immediately as he did so, He felt a force tug on him, suddenly pulling him down. The sudden force caused him to slip down the hole, disappearing into the darkness beneath. The open glass door shut back with a bang, reducing the area to absolute silence once more. It was cold, chillingly cold. Looking around while brushing his shoulders, white smoke repeatedly puffed out of Ryuk's mouth. He stared into the pitch darkness, unable to see even his own right hand. "Uncle Bob?" he called out, his voice echoing through the darkness. But like some sort of command, the light bulbs immediately switched on, brilliant and powerful rays of white light flooding the area. Ryuk winced and closed his eyes tightly. "You're late, bloody mutt." The gentle masculine voice echoed through the space. Ryuk snapped his head to the side and found a gray-haired man standing there, a prominent walking stick in his white palms. Even though he tried to keep a hard face, Ryuk easily noticed the relief in his expression. Unconsciously, tears burst from his eyes as he rushed toward the man and gave him a tight hug. "You're alive, Uncle Bob. Outside. Everyone." Ryuk choked out, half in tears, recalling the sights he had witnessed earlier. "I know, Ryuk. I know." As always, Uncle Bob's voice was calming and soothing to the nerves. Ryuk felt his fear dissipating like ashes in the wind, and once more, he regained his composure. But his eyes quickly narrowed when he looked around and witnessed something strange, something bizarre. There were ashes all around Uncle Bob, and they came from him. His skin was releasing ashes that dispersed into the wind. Ryuk's fingers unconsciously stretched forward as he waved through the ashes surrounding Uncle Bob's body. However, his attention was soon diverted by a question. "You fought an enhanced beast, like I told you not to?" Uncle Bob asked. Ryuk took a few steps backward, staring at the man whose face had turned cold and serious. "I accidentally stepped on a mutated rat's butt, and it wouldn't let me go. In the end, the only choice I had was to fight. Thankfully, I won, and I got this," Ryuk called out, dipping his hand into his pocket and bringing out a bag of coins. Uncle Bob stared fixedly at him, seemingly dazed. Ryuk wanted to smirk in pride, believing his uncle was shocked at the bag of coins. But he quickly realized Uncle Bob wasn't looking at the coins at all. Instead, his gaze was fixed on Ryuk's severed left hand. "Your arm?" Uncle Bob asked, advancing toward Ryuk and taking the arm into his cold palm. "It's no big deal. It doesn't even hurt," Ryuk claimed. But all he received was Uncle Bob silently staring at the sparking electricity in his arm before letting out a deep sigh. "Do you know why I asked you never to cross paths with an E-grade creature?" Uncle Bob suddenly asked. Ryuk's eyes narrowed. "Because you think I'm nothing but a scared, weak, bloody mutt?" Ryuk barked, feeling a twinge of anger in his heart. How insulting was it that he, who had the power to go toe-to-toe with an E-grade creature, would still be warned not to cross paths with them. His uncle never saw his capability, never acknowledged that he, Ryuk, was strong. He always treated him like a child, something Ryuk despised and only tolerated because he had no choice. "I asked you never to fight an E-grade creature because, in every fight, there's a sacrifice. This fight you had, you lost an arm. It could have very well been your head or your heart. Before you get into a fight, assess well the extremity of the sacrifice you may have to pay. If it's too great, then never get into the fight at all. This is the only way you will survive in this world. Do you understand, Ryuk?" Uncle Bob asked, his shining blue eyes fixed on Ryuk's face, exposing an extremely powerful glow that cast a bit of light on Ryuk's features. Unknowingly, a pressure descended on Ryuk. Even though he felt unwillingness in his heart, he was forced to bow his head and give a nod. "Good. Now, I have a thing or two to inform you about. I bet you noticed the ashes outside in the streets and the burned-down buildings on your way here, didn't you?" Uncle Bob asked, turning his back to Ryuk as he walked forward toward the center of the glass-like room. "Yes, I did. I also saw that weird bird creature." "What type of mutated beast is that?" Ryuk asked, still reeling in shock from the sight in his memory. "That is no mutated creature," Uncle Bob replied. his eyes flashing as he arrived at the room's center and tapped the butt of his walking stick twice on the ground. Immediately, a whirring sound filled the area, and strange, runic patterns began appearing on the ground. But what caught Ryuk's attention the most were his uncle's words. "If that wasn't a mutated creature, then what is it?" Ryuk asked, furrowing his brows. "That is a null." "A null?" Ryuk screamed unconsciously, stopping in his tracks as he stared at his uncle, who slowly turned his gaze to him. When Uncle Bob's lips opened, the next words he spoke gave Ryuk the shock of his life. "And it came seeking none but you, Ryuk. A null." Even though Uncle Bob barely spoke of the tales of those creatures to Ryuk, there was no individual on Endearth who could claim to have no idea of what type of creature they were. According to what Ryuk had been able to learn about this world from the other core hunters he reluctantly met with, it was said that the world had changed and that it wasn't only humans living here. There were new creatures like vampires and werewolves, which Ryuk understood to be humans who drank blood and those who could shift into wolves. Even though Ryuk himself had not met one in person, the way they were described to him made it easy to believe in their existence. It couldn't be mere fantasy. But reigning above all these creatures, and striking terror into the hearts of every living being on Endearth, was the group known as the Nulls. They were said to be savagely powerful and supremely intelligent, with the average Null being able to flatten entire cities. They had no allies, and neither did they care about humans, vampires, or werewolves. They would kill and devour anything on sight to improve their power. It was even said that it was due to the existence of these Nulls that the human race was given a breather, as the other powerful creatures that should have hunted humans ignored them to focus on battling against the bigger threat. Eventually, those creatures were forced to ally with the humans themselves. The Nulls were like the lions of a jungle, and their name petrified every single living thing on Endearth. That was why Ryuk found himself unable to move away from where he stood, looking dazedly at Uncle Bob. It had never been recorded that a Null creature had ever come to Sector E. What petrified Ryuk the most was the fact that the Null had come looking for him. Why would a Null come looking for him? A boy from the trashy Grade E city of Endearth. "I know you have a lot of questions in your mind, Ryuk. You are desperate for the answers, aren't you? About who your mum and dad are? About why you're robotic instead of human flesh? About why I have always ignored every one of these questions of yours whenever you asked?" Uncle Bob said, as Ryuk noticed the ground beneath his feet suddenly began shaking in a powerful tremor. He watched as the space before Uncle Bob opened and something emerged from deep underground. It looked a bit like an altar, and on top of it were two objects. The first that Ryuk could see was a gem, a glowing blue gem inscribed with strange runic lines, and the second thing was an egg. Uncle Bob's hand stretched outward as he took the two objects in his hands and turned back to Ryuk, walking towards him. He arrived before him and kneeled on a single knee. But this time, Ryuk was unable to muster a word as he stared into Uncle Bob's eyes. The way Uncle Bob was looking at him, it was remorseful. It was filled with so much sadness that Ryuk's heart almost spiraled out of his chest. He could sense it. Something bad was about to happen. And only now did Ryuk's attention return to the fact that Uncle Bob's body was dispersing into ashes. "Uncle Bob, your skin," he called out to him, but Uncle Bob only smiled. "Look at these two objects, Ryuk," Uncle Bob said, as Ryuk's attention was forcefully drawn to the items in his palm. "This gem right here in my hand is the reason why we've been here for close to 16 years now," Uncle Bob said as Ryuk's eyes narrowed. "What is it?" "It's a guide, Ryuk, to reveal to you your full potential. With it, all the answers you want will be revealed to you. All I beg of you is to have patience. With patience, everything you want will be in your hands," Uncle Bob said. He continued before Ryuk could say a word. "And this egg is a present from your mother to you. I am a loyal follower of hers, and she tasked me with the responsibility of raising you in her stead. As a present for when you turn 16 years old, she asked me to give this to you. I have previously felt you were still too young to carry the burden of this all, but now, I'm afraid I can no longer delay." "A present from mother?" Ryuk thought in his head, feeling an ache in his heart. but he pressed it down as he advanced towards Uncle Bob and grabbed his hands. "Uncle Bob, you're dispersing into smoke. What exactly is wrong with you?" he asked, this time his voice louder, as he noticed that Uncle Bob was really starting to fade into nothing. Both his legs were gone, and his entire body was starting to vanish as well. Ryuk moved, trying to drag the ashes back into his body forcefully, amidst tears raining down. Tears he himself was oblivious to, but he failed. Ryuk's body already knew what was wrong with Uncle Bob, while his mind refused to acknowledge the fact. "I've been dead for a long time, Ryuk. Ever since I was separated from her and helplessly ran away from that war. The only thing that kept me alive was you and her final order given to me." "What nonsense are you saying? We need to find a way to get you to old Jack. He can save you," Ryuk said as he moved to his uncle's side, wanting to raise him by his arms. But with shock, he watched as his hand passed through his uncle's body almost like Uncle Bob was nothing but a hologram. "Take it, Ryuk," Uncle Bob called seriously, stretching both objects forward toward Ryuk. But the boy paid the items no attention, still trying to push Uncle Bob's body, failing repeatedly. "Ryuk! Ryuk! Ryuk!" The third call brought Ryuk back to reality as he turned his teary face to his uncle, who stretched out his hands. "Take it, please. You need not worry about me, for I will always be with you. I promise." Uncle Bob consoled as Ryuk felt the two objects in his palms. The moment the objects passed on to him, Uncle Bob started disintegrating into ashes incredibly fast. Ryuk himself felt a wave of drowsiness hit him as both objects in his possession suddenly burrowed into his heart, sending an endless wave of pain slamming into his head. Yet he ignored it as he tried to hold on tight to Uncle Bob only to fail. His body wrapped around Uncle Bob tightly, trying to prevent him from leaving. But no matter how hard he tried or cried, Uncle Bob only kept dispersing. In his final moments, Ryuk felt a hand wrap around him. It was Uncle Bob's remaining right hand, and for one last time, he felt the familiar coldness of that body. "You've really grown, bloody mutt. You made me proud." These were Uncle Bob's last words as Ryuk felt his body completely disappear into nothingness. The last thing he saw was Uncle Bob's smile, one so peaceful, a smile Ryuk had never seen on his uncle's otherwise otherworldly serious face. "Uncle Bob! Uncle Bob! Uncle Bob is gone?" Automatic detonation of Secret Lab will now begin in 3, 2, 1. Kaboom! Ryuk's roar was automatically cut off as an incredibly fiery explosion rocked the entire area around him. Immediately, a body was sent flying out of the ground, rolling chaotically through the air before smashing into the top of a hill. The entire world blackened out instantly. The last thing Ryuk saw in his line of sight were the following words. "Draconic Pets Evolution System integration has begun. A worthy bond has been detected. Undergoing fusion process." A mismatched pair of light, red and blue, flashed through the world, and slowly, he felt the darkened ceiling above settle into an image of one focal point before his gaze. His hand clutched his head, feeling a wave of headache assaulting his brain, which he tried to shake off by shaking his head. "You're awake!" The voice rang out to Ryuk from the side, and his body automatically tensed. However, he could sense the familiarity in the voice. Turning his head, he found the bearded man with a smoke stick in hand, taking gentle puffs while his bloodshot eyes stared at him blankly. This was none other than old Jack, the one with whom Ryuk had previously made a deal of course. "I sensed the strange ash in the air and a brilliant flash of light coming from your side of the settlement. I could guess something was wrong. That's how I found you, buried on top of the hill," old Jack narrated before Ryuk could ask. Slowly, the memories of the day came rushing back, and Ryuk's hand clenched automatically. "That said, it has been close to a week now that you've been unconscious. That must. Uncle Bob is gone." Old Jack's voice was automatically cut off by Ryuk's words, causing the man to turn and look at him. Currently, Ryuk's hands were folded into fists, his teeth gnashing together. To his reaction, Old Jack stared for a long moment before taking a long puff of his smoke and exhaling loudly. Old Bob was a good man, Jack finally said. And I'd say he managed to leave a legacy behind him. That's something many here don't get to achieve before their passing. Old Jack's words caused Ryuk's tightly clenched hands to relax slightly. What Jack had said made a lot of sense. Many people died here in Sector E, either lost to mutated creatures or some petty fight. The world mocked their deaths, and no one remembered their names. Most people in Sector E were banished here, after all. Who cared if they lived or died? But the same couldn't be said for Uncle Bob. The man had left Ryuk a legacy that would make his name known and never forgotten. One could say Uncle Bob had achieved something that the majority here could never dream of before their deaths. Clank! The sound of metal clanking suddenly resonated, drawing Ryuk's attention. Old Jack was pouring a drink into 2 metallic cups. He walked toward Ryuk and offered one. Here, Jack said, passing the cup filled with purple liquid. A toast to Old Bob, he added, clinking his cup with Ryuk's before downing it in one go. Ryuk curiously stared at the purple liquid before downing it as well. Instantly, his face twisted, the cup slipping from his hands as it felt like lava was being poured down his throat. Cough, cough, cough. A fit of coughing escaped Ryuk's lips as he scratched at his burning throat, trying to ease the pain. But as the heat subsided, something else caught his attention. His eyes widened as he stared at his left arm. The arm, which had been severed by the enhanced mutated rat, was now back to normal, its white skin clear and glowing as it had been previously. I guess Old Bob managed to patch up your arm. A work of art, I'd say, Old Jack remarked, staring at Ryuk's arm in amazement. While an arm could be replaced with robotics, replicating skin on a mechanical arm was impossible. It was always obvious when a hand was artificial, its metallic parts betraying its true nature. Yet now Ryuk's arm bore no such signs. It was as if his arm had regrown entirely, but Jack knew well that it was mechanical. In fact, it wasn't just Ryuk's arm that was metallic. A small hum escaped Ryuk's lips as he inspected his arm. He knew Uncle Bob hadn't managed to patch it up before everything exploded. When he had been knocked out, his arm had still been severed. It was almost as if his arm had regrown itself. So, Old Jack suddenly spoke, drawing Ryuk's gaze. What do you plan on doing now with Old Bob gone? The question made Ryuk's eyes flash with determination as he sat upright on the metallic bed. When I arrived back at the place after you passed me the money, I saw a huge dark bird flying into the sky, Ryuk began. From its aura, it's safe to say it was the one that burned down the entire settlement and killed Uncle Bob. Ryuk's eyes darkened as he recalled the scene. He had seen everything reduced to ashes, and he could sense that the ashes were linked to the bird. When Uncle Bob had died, he had turned to ash as well. It wasn't hard to identify the bird as the culprit. Uncle Bob called it a null, Ryuk said, his tone sharp. And I intend to chase it to the ends of the world and sever its head. And how does that help your life? I only see a decision made from the furiousness of the heart, Old Jack said, puffing his smoke as Ryuk snorted coldly. As if I'll allow what took the life of my only family member to dance freely through the skies. My uncle's death will not be in vain, Ryuk shot back. Old Jack believed Ryuk's decision to hunt down the null that killed his uncle was a foolish one, carried by the fury of a grieving heart. But to Ryuk it was more than that. He wouldn't allow his uncle to die for nothing. He would seek revenge for his innocent uncle and kill the null. Then maybe Uncle Bob's soul would finally be able to rest in peace. And how do you plan to kill a null? One so powerful it wiped out your entire settlement? Such a null could have been as powerful as even an A-grade mutated beast. If I may remind you, the last beast that tore your arm off days ago was only an E-grade beast. So how do you plan on winning? That is, if you ever manage to find a flying null in the first place? Old Jack challenged as Ryuk's eyes flashed. Truly, the null had been incredibly powerful. Its aura and its pure, enormous size were enough to cast uncontrollable fear into Ryuk's heart. A gaze from such a creature would have been enough to send Ryuk himself to the Shadow Realm. The Null could very well be as powerful as an A-grade mutated beast, if not more. Right now, Ryuk could barely battle E-grade beasts, and he knew full well it would still be a close call. To fight an A-grade beast, which was 4 levels above an E-grade, it would be nothing but suicide for someone like him. But a confident smile soon made its way to Ryuk's face, as he felt a light flash at the corner of his eyes. I will find the Null, and I will eliminate it, even if I have to go to hell and train with the devil himself. I will find that bird and sever its head, one day. Soon, Ryuk declared. Old Jack opened one of his eyes, looking at Ryuk. The young man's voice didn't contain just arrogance but confidence. It was well known that some people, upon sighting a Null even once in their life, would go mad from the sheer shock and fear. Yet here he was, smiling confidently, claiming he would sever the head of a Null. Not only had he seen a Null, but he had also witnessed the destructive capability of a single one of these creatures. Yet he was not afraid. Instead, he seemed even more confident in his ability to defeat it. While some might call this blind ignorance, such a heart was something rare to find, even in the higher grade cities. This was something old Jack understood well from his own past life. A person with a brave heart that wouldn't entertain fear, like Ryuk's, was an extraordinarily rare one indeed. It would be a pity if such a heart were to stay here and rot away in this underdog world. No amount of training one does here would be enough to even defeat a D-grade mutated beast, let alone a Null. The only way Ryuk could achieve his goal was by moving up the sector and finding a school. That would set him on the right path to achieving his goal. And perhaps this time, Ryuk would be able to achieve what old Jack himself had failed to do. The young man before him had a heart far stronger than his own when Jack had first started his journey. The young man before him now had a goal, one he was determined to see through to the end. And so old Jack decided to help him. Maybe this will be enough to pay back the one I owe you, Bob, he thought. Ryuk, tell me, what do you know of the other sectors? The other sectors? Ryuk asked with a raised eyebrow as he turned to look at old Jack, who took a long sip of his smoke stick while gently nodding his head. From what I've heard, there are a total of 5 sectors, also known as grades. There are E-grade sectors, the absolute lowest of the low, such as this place. It is said to be unsafe and offers little to no protection against the Null's attacks, just like the attack that destroyed everything. The next higher grade city is the D-grade city, which offers better amenities and is said to be more guarded and safe. Then the C-grade, followed by the B-grade, with the highest being the A-grade. The A-grade is the highest and is said to contain the most concentrated power in the entire world. It is a place where the most powerful races live side by side, and it is said that all Null attacks are successfully negated, with any Null daring to attack killed immediately. It is the safest of the sectors but also the most expensive to live in. In summary, the E-grade sector is the lowest of the low, and the A-grade city is the best and most secure place, even though not everyone can live there. Ryuk replied. Old Jack exhaled his puff loudly before placing it to the side and nodding his head. Do you know of the Apex Barracks just a few miles from this place? Old Jack asked as Ryuk nodded his head. The Apex Barracks was the only place in Sector E with communication to the other sectors. Slowly, Old Jack rose up and walked toward Ryuk, bending to the ground and looking straight into his eyes. If you are really serious about killing that Null, which I can see you are, then the only place with enough power to help you achieve your goal is by joining an academy. In short, you would have to leave this sector and move to another one, Old Jack said. Ryuk smiled mockingly. Leaving Sector E is impossible. One can only come in, not leave. It was common knowledge. Some of the scrap hunters even referred to Sector E as a prison because leaving was impossible. What Old Jack was saying sounded like pure fantasy. At least, that was what Ryuk thought until the man raised his palm to him. A light coalesced together, forming an object that fell into Old Jack's palm. You must leave Sector E, Ryuk. What is this? Ryuk asked, looking at the golden card in Old Jack's palm. It was glass smooth, and drawn on it was a strange symbol of 2 folded wings crossing each other. A pass, Old Jack replied, passing the card to Ryuk. It was strangely warm and glassy to the touch. This is a pass that you would give to those in the Apex barracks. Long ago, I was given this by a friend as a token of appreciation. Anyone who possesses this pass and submits it to an Apex authority will be directed to the owner of this pass, who owes a single wish. That wish will be fulfilled if they are capable of it. Old Jack's voice lowered. This actually belongs to a pretty powerful family in Sector B. When you're asked for the wish, tell them you want to enter an academy. Ryuk went still, staring blankly at the card. I should leave Sector E? The thought came as quite the shock to Ryuk. Sector E was a place one could enter but never leave. While Ryuk, like every young boy, had truly dreamed of seeing the world and the other sectors, he knew well that the future of that dream was bleak. He had accepted that fact and came to terms with reality. Besides, his years of bonding with Sector E had made him embrace his fate. Yet, right now, everything was changing, and it was changing so fast. He had lost Uncle Bob, and now the knowledge that he would not be stuck in this place forever had been shattered. He could leave. Things were moving too fast for him, and he didn't know whether to feel happy or sad. Sector E was all he had ever known. There was a fear of survival if he moved to the other sectors, yet at the same time he was also amazed by the prospect of seeing the outside world. Look around you, Ryuk. Everyone here has already lived their life. Everyone here has already accepted their fate. Old Jack's voice was firm yet melancholy. We no longer look towards any bright future because we've already lived it. Our will to fight or to live is gone. We're just surviving, patiently waiting for time to pass. None of us have any goals at all. His tone shifted, almost fatherly. But look at you. You're 16, filled with life and with a goal. If you stay here forever, you wouldn't move an inch from your current path and would be doomed to mediocrity. He paused, letting his words settle. Is that the future you want? Or is that the future your uncle would want for you? If you ever have any hope of avenging your uncle's death or any hope of living a true life and possessing tales worth telling, then you have to move away from here. You have to live, just like everyone here once did. Jack's expression softened. But don't worry, this place will always have its arms open for you. Even though, honestly, I'd prefer you never came back here. You get the gist of it, right? Ryuk's hands clenched the card tightly. But why? He asked, raising his head to look at old Jack. You said this is a pass, right? Then why are you giving it to me? This is also your opportunity to leave this place. Why are you giving me your only chance of ever leaving? The golden card in his hands felt heavy. Ryuk knew well that if anyone else in Sector E learned about it, it would cause a bloodbath. Ryuk wasn't the only one who wanted to leave. If Sector E was a prison, then this card could be said to be the only key out. Who wouldn't want it? Who wouldn't kill for it? Yet old Jack was essentially passing him the key, squandering his own chance of ever being able to leave. Ryuk couldn't understand why. Jack said, scratching his chin. Let's just say I owe old Bob one, and I hope this can repay that debt. Ryuk narrowed his eyes as Jack continued. Besides, he said, rising to his feet, I've possessed that card for close to 50 years, yet I found no use for it until now. It's essentially just been collecting dust. Since I'll never really use it anyway, why not give it to someone who'll make good use of it and also settle an old debt? Seems like quite a good trade to me, no? Old Jack moved behind Ryuk and walked towards the exit of the room. Grabbing the doorknob, he twisted it and was about to leave when Ryuk's voice stopped him. Old Jack, Ryuk called. Thank you. Ah, don't sweat it, kid, Old Jack said with a wave. It's getting late. Go get some rest. I'll prepare some clothes you might need for your travels tomorrow. Sleep tight, bloody mutt. With that, old Jack opened the door and left. Now, alone in the room, Ryuk sat on the bed, staring fixedly at the golden card in his palm. I'll be leaving for Sector B tomorrow, he thought, clenching the card tightly. He soon relaxed his grip, placing the card into his pocket. Your death won't be in vain, Uncle Bob. I promise. The pain of losing Uncle Bob still hurt badly, but Ryuk knew better than to cry his eyes out. He would find a way to kill that bird-like Null and give Uncle Bob the justice he deserved. That would make Uncle Bob proud. Much more than endless tears ever could. Now that he was alone, Ryuk finally had the chance to focus on the mysterious light flashing in the corner of his vision. It felt as if there was a strange presence within his eyes, and he concentrated hard on it. "Just what are you?" he murmured. But what happened next caused him to jerk back in shock and slam his body onto the hard, metallic ground. System fusion process completed. Identifying host characteristics. Host character found. "Hello, Ryuk. What the hell are you?" Ryuk asked in shock, backing off quickly as his hand unconsciously swiped forth with speed, lashing at the golden panel in front of him. But his hands weaved through nothing. Ryuk calmed down significantly before laughing mockingly. "Seems like Uncle Bob's death really took quite the toll on my head. Now I'm even seeing things and hearing voices in my head." Ryuk thought in desperation. "Tsh, I must have gone crazy." He wiped his eyes with both hands before opening them again. But he was stunned when he saw the same golden notification flashing before his eyes. "Host has not gone crazy. Please allow me to introduce myself. I am Snowy, an AI guide in charge of the Draconic Pets evolution system, which was built by a person you would normally refer to as Uncle Bob. According to the memories obtained from my fusion with you, I was passed into you after Uncle Bob gave you the gem. Does Host still remember this information?" The set of words appeared, and Ryuk's eyes flashed as, for a moment, memories of the gem and the strange egg Uncle Bob had passed to him in that underground lab resurfaced in his mind. He also remembered the moment when the gem disappeared. Now, he recalled well that Uncle Bob had said the gem was a guide to show him his true potential. So this was it? The gem given to him by his uncle was responsible for this interface. "It seems the host has finally come to terms with my existence." The system notification said this as Ryuk felt his heart calming down now that he understood what it was. "So you're the gem Uncle Bob passed to me at the last second?" Ryuk asked just to be sure. "Affirmative, host. You can also refer to me as the Draconic Pets evolution system." "Hello, Ryuk. How are you doing?" The system asked once more as Ryuk sat up properly. His head shifted to one side and then to the other, scanning his surroundings before narrowing his eyes. "While the interface might seem to be in front of you, I am currently being simulated directly into your brain. The outside effect you feel is but a mirage to make things easier. I can never leave your field of vision unless you issue the command to disperse." The system's words felt like they were reading Ryuk's thoughts. "Disperse," Ryuk muttered. Immediately, the interface disappeared completely from his line of vision, shrinking to a small by the side of his eye. Ryuk unconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. "So I can call it out and in whenever I like. That means I'm in control of it," he thought. The last thing he wanted was for something he couldn't control to remain in his head. "Reappear," he ordered, and once more, the notification panel appeared before him. How is this even possible? What level of technology can this even be? Ryuk thought to himself in amazement, staring at the golden panel flashing in and out before his gaze. "Does host wish for me to explain the information regarding my creation?" the system asked, but Ryuk furrowed his eyebrows and shook his head. "No, thanks. Still, it's surprising. How could Uncle Bob make this?" he thought, bewildered. Ryuk had lived with his uncle ever since he had been able to see and think, and he had never caught him doing anything but sitting in a chair and staring into the distance. Sometimes Uncle Bob would disappear for a while and then suddenly reappear. He had never seen him tinkering with technological tools before, and in his 16 years of life, he had never noticed that underground space where Uncle Bob had called him. Now, this technological artifact, which was undoubtedly incredibly advanced, claimed to have been created by his uncle? How was that even possible? Just who was Uncle Bob, really? Still, Ryuk set this information aside as he moved back onto his bed, lying on his back while staring at the interface. "You said you wanted to make some introduction of yourself. Go on," he commanded, recalling the system's former words. "Okay. As I have stated before, I am the AI guide implanted into this system, the Draconic Pets evolution system. My main purpose is to guide the host on his journey to realizing his hidden potential. What hidden potential? Ryuk asked, and the system paused before a new line of words appeared. For host to learn more about the system, the host should think or call out the word status. The system instructed, and Ryuk narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Who knew if saying the word status would lead to his head exploding? Still, he trusted his uncle and called out the word status. Draconic Pets Evolution System. Attributes, skills and abilities. Pets. Shop. Quests. The interface panel changed, displaying the above. Ryuk magnified his attention on the first panel, and it changed again. Attributes. Name Ryuk Null. Age 16. Race. Half null, half unknown. Level 1. EXP 0/100. Cultivation level. Yet to begin. Stats. Strength. 14. Agility. 15. Intelligence. 15. Charisma 2. Endurance. 15. Luck null. The attributes points. 0. Hey, system? Are you functioning properly? Ryuk asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. Why does host feel this way? Well, because you obviously got my race wrong. And what's with the null luck? Race. Half null, half unknown. This was the clearest signal to Ryuk that the system just couldn't be functioning well. How could he, who was clearly a human, be a null halfling? But the next few words from the system had Ryuk's eyes furrowing. The host may have doubts, but the system has been able to scan the blood flowing through the host's veins, around the heart area, and can easily determine with an accuracy of 99.99% that the host is a null. A half-null might perhaps be the exact term to describe it, as flowing through the host's veins is another bloodline, which the system has never come into contact with, and therefore is unable to truly determine, hence the designation, unknown. But that's impossible. Are you blind? I am a human. Look at my arms and legs. Ryuk barked back. The system does not focus on the host's external body as a determining factor of what race the host is. The system targets the DNA strands, and according to that, host is nothing like a human. Not even the slightest trace of human genome can be found in the host at all, and the possibility of the unknown bloodline being human is nil. Host is a hybrid of a null and an unknown other race with unknown origins. As for the host possessing arms and legs, according to the system's calculations, host's arms and legs are not actual flesh but appear to be a product of incredibly advanced bio-nanotechnology from a seemingly higher race. Apart from crucial organs like the heart and the brain, host's entire body seems to have been made of this advanced nanotechnology. Fascinating is the fact that this bio-nanotechnology that makes up the host seems to be capable of separation and rapid mending, just like how cells divide and rapidly replicate themselves. This feature allows the host's body to replicate itself, making it capable of regeneration. This feature is most likely what allowed the host to recover from their severed hand. A potential scanning of the host's body to understand more is being conducted. Scanning is being prevented by a mysterious force, and the system does not possess enough knowledge to decode the limiting force. All I can deduce from this is that host's body seems to be capable of improving its durability and power. A wall of text suddenly appeared on the interface, as the system went on and on about his mysterious body. Yet Ryuk's eyes never left the panel, taking in every single bit of information, as ridiculous and absurd as it sounded. So you're saying, apart from my important organs, I am actually a living robot made of nothing but biotata technology. No, host. It is bio-nanotechnology. And also no, host is not a robot, as the host possesses their own brain and heart instead of a power core or programming chip. Only the host's physical parts are made of this bio-nanotechnology. It's as if the host's true organs had been torn away and replaced with this technology, or maybe the host never possessed a body at all, hence the fusion with the bio-nanotechnology. Be a dump. Be a dump. Be a dump. The sound of the heart beating wildly resonated through the room as Ryuk stared blankly at the screen, jaw-dropping. His entire understanding of his life was being ruthlessly torn apart. Ever since birth, Ryuk had always felt different when it came to his body. It was stronger, more agile, and faster than normal. He had been fortunate to test it against a few hunters, and one thing Ryuk had always noticed was that his bones seemed stronger than normal. He had always believed he had a normal arm until his fight with the sewer rat, when he discovered he was a robot. At first, Ryuk thought it was only his left arm. But the information he was currently being given by the system was tearing apart everything he knew. Immediately, Ryuk's eyes darted around the room, and he soon spotted a knife at the side. With shaky legs, he walked toward it, grabbed the knife, and then, "Puch Hai!" dying. The sound of the blade tearing through flesh resonated, but closely following was the sound of metal clashing against metal as Ryuk dug the knife straight into his right leg. Tearing the knife out, a wave of pain assaulted his head, but he bit down hard as blood began flowing out of his leg. "You see now? I'm human. Look at the blood flowing," Ryuk said aloud to the system, though it seemed more like he was consoling himself. But his thoughts were interrupted by a new set of notifications. Host should remain in that position for the next 5 minutes and watch. The system's voice suddenly broke through. Ryuk raised an eyebrow, but it hadn't even been a few seconds when his eyes widened in shock. Slowly, the blood on the knife that Ryuk had stabbed into his leg, as well as the blood on his leg, began rising into the air like drops of water merging together. The blood started moving into itself, and Ryuk watched in disbelief as it flowed back into the wound on his legs. His flesh, which had been torn, suddenly developed a strange metallic goo that flowed over the tear in his leg. It began hardening and repairing itself. In less than 4 minutes, all the blood Ryuk had spilled from stabbing his leg had returned to his body. A metallic sheen covered the wound briefly before strange white flesh began growing over it in the shape of weird scales. The injury was quickly concealed, and once more, Ryuk's leg was smooth and indistinguishable from the rest of his body. "Holy mother of sweet monkey milk!" Ryuk cursed in shock, backing away from his own leg. The reason for the blood returning to the host might be due to the host's blood not being finite, unlike the bio-nanotechnology. Hopefully, this proves to the host that their body is not flesh, but an almost perfect mimicry of it. "So you were right," Ryuk muttered to himself. He had thought the system was scary, but it seemed he was the one being fooled all this time. So wait, if my legs and arms are not human but mimicry of the human body, does that mean the blood flowing through me is not human either? Could it actually be that of a null? But how? How can I be a null? How can I be one of those detestable evil creatures? How can I be part of a race that just killed my uncle? Ryuk asked repeatedly, feeling his mind breaking down when suddenly, an idea entered his head, and he paused. Wait, Uncle Bob was killed by a null. But instead of being burned to nothing, I found him still surviving in the underground basement. The fact that he disintegrated into ash in the end means he must have exchanged moves with the null. But he survived and lived. The null is as strong as an A-grade mutant beast. How could Uncle Bob not have died immediately? And also, could it be that Uncle Bob was never human either? The idea of his entire world being torn down and everything he knew being shaken up was overwhelming. Only now did Ryuk begin to understand it. Everything up until now had been a lie. But could it even be called a lie? He never really asked his uncle about his race because he never once doubted that he was human. But the system had just revealed that he was a null, and now Ryuk was doubting everything. The creation of the system, surviving against a powerful null attack, the lab underneath their home. HS uncle was definitely not some ordinary old man. Even more so, Ryuk now believed his uncle's death at the hands of the null wasn't an accident. It now made more sense when his uncle said the null had come looking for him. If he truly was a null half-blood, then it absolutely made sense that a null would come searching for him. Is the host all right? The system suddenly asked, awakening Ryuk from his train of thought. You have been unresponsive for exactly 15 minutes now, the system explained as Ryuk's fingers dug into his weird browny white hair, pulling at it repeatedly. Eventually, he let go and sat down properly on the bed. What's with my terrible luck? Ryuk muttered, shifting his attention to the tabs before him. Right now, he had a billion questions raging through his mind, each one threatening to drive him insane. But he knew he had to take things slowly. He still wasn't fully convinced the system was correct. Maybe everything happening now was just a dream, and he was still unconscious on top of the hill. However, Ryuk wanted to learn everything he could about the system. His uncle cryptically said the system would give him all the answers he needed if he had patience. Now, Ryuk felt an urge to understand every single thing about the system. He calmed his mind, forcing down his questions and choosing to move beyond them. To understand the host's reason for having no luck, the host must first comprehend what luck truly is according to the system's definition. Luck, a mysterious force of the universe that influences rare encounters and loot outcomes. According to the system's identification, the host seems to have no luck at all, a concept that is very mystifying to even the system itself. However, I believe that with the aid of attribute points and rewards obtained from completing quests, the host should eventually be able to eliminate this absence of luck. The system finished, and Ryuk could only hum in response. Still, he wasn't too worried. While his luck couldn't be said to be exceptionally good or bad, Ryuk wasn't the type to believe in luck in the first place. Let's move to the next tab, Ryuk instructed, focusing on the tab following attributes. Skills and abilities. 1. Regeneration Level 1. Host's power to recover from injuries. Important note: host should contract a beast to possess new skills and abilities. The Skills and Abilities tab seemed pretty much empty to Ryuk. Apart from the regeneration ability, which he guessed was a result of his strange robotic body, there wasn't anything else noteworthy. Let's move to the next tab. Shop. Locked. Will be unlocked after the host contracts their first pet. Quests. Quest available. 1. Quest details. Contract your first pet. Rewards. 1. Shop unlocks. 2. Gain a random skill from the pet's skill array. 3. A new companion to help the host. 4. 1 level up cards. 5. Plus 100 EXP. Ryuk mused upon seeing the information. At least the Quests tab seemed to show some difference. It appeared that, right now, he would have to contract a beast for more options to become available. That brought him to the important question: how would he contract a pet? Looking at the last tab, he felt his answers would most likely be found there. Pets. Current pet slot. 1. Note: a potential pet is present within the host's pet world. Pet is currently undergoing hatching. Would the host like to view the pet world? The system suddenly asked as Ryuk's eyebrows furrowed. He nodded. Host consciousness will now be transferred into the pet world. In the next instant, Ryuk's entire environment underwent a pause. His blue eyes flashed with light, and the next moment, the whole world around him changed. Before Ryuk's gaze was an endless expanse of green grassy plains. It was as if he were in the sky, staring down at everything like a god. What really took his breath away, though, was the gigantic egg that was present in the center of this grassy expanse, surrounded by mysterious starlight blinking in and out of existence. Wait, is that? Yes, this is the egg that was given to the host by Uncle Bob, as recorded in the host's memories. The system replied. But how is it so big? The host's view in the pet world is magnified hundreds of times compared to the outside world. The system explained, and Ryuk nodded. Still, he was dazzled by the glowing egg. On its surface were strange multicolored runes that gleamed with beautiful light, making it impossible for Ryuk to look away. The egg before the host is currently hatching. Since it is present within the host's world, the hatching period has been automatically reduced by half. Still, according to calculations, it will take at least 48 hours before the egg hatches. The system's words made Ryuk's eyes flash. Somehow, he felt like that time frame was far too long, and he could barely wait to see what the egg would hatch into. There is a way for the host to speed up the egg's hatching period. The system suddenly offered, and Ryuk's eyes gleamed. How? By giving the egg your blood essence. This will potentially increase the hatching speed significantly. My blood essence? Ryuk questioned, his curiosity deepening. But wouldn't giving away my blood essence harm me in any way? He asked just to be safe. If he is required to simply give away a few drops of blood, then he couldn't be bothered. But if it will significantly affect his health, then it doesn't seem a wise move to make. Giving away a lot of blood essence might result in a feeling of dizziness and weakness in Host, but if Host gives away a little amount, like just 2 drops as needed in this situation, then Host need not worry. The system reassured, and Ryuk decided to give it a try. So, how do I pass the egg my blood essence? Ryuk asked, preparing himself for the exercise. It's simple. Host simply needs to chant the blood essence spell. The number of times chanted correlates to the number of drops Host wishes to give to the egg. And how many drops do you think will be enough to reduce the hatching time of the egg by half? 3 will be enough, the system said. And the second it finished, a new spell appeared in Ryuk's head. Immediately, he chanted it aloud, his voice resonating incredibly loudly through the pet world. Sanguis meus vita nova. Ovum hoc spiritu meo animeter. Fiat voluntas mea. Sanguis meus vita nova. Ovum hoc spiritu meo animeter. Fiat voluntas mea. Sanguis meus vita nova. Ovum hoc spiritu meo animeter. Fiat voluntas mea. As soon as Ryuk finished chanting the spell, 3 large drops of golden liquid fell from above the pet world, heading straight to the egg. They splashed upon its surface, and the light surrounding the egg flared out even more powerfully. The lights increased vastly until they formed a small glowing bulb. Ryuk's godlike blood essence was quickly absorbed into the egg, further intensifying the light oozing from it. In the next instant, Ryuk heard the sound of a crack as the pet world shattered into glass-like pieces, and he felt his consciousness dispersing. The next moment, he found himself back in his room, breathing heavily, his chest heaving up and down, and cold sweat dripping from his forehead. What happened? It seems Host lost control of the pet world due to the feeling of weakness endured from giving away his blood essence. Host is advised to refrain from such actions for now, the system replied. System alert. The egg's hatching period will be completed in 20 to 24 hours. At least my aim was achieved, Ryuk muttered. Congratulations. Host has completed a hidden quest. Pass blood essence to an uncontracted egg. Rewards. Host charisma has been increased by +5 points. Charisma 2 +5. I completed a hidden quest. Makes sense they call it hidden since I didn't find it previously in the quest tab, Ryuk said thoughtfully. What's charisma, anyway? Charisma affects the bond with pets and their loyalty. The increase in charisma points means that when the egg hatches, the pet won't find Host repulsive like it might with other creatures. The more charisma Host amasses, the more other beasts will see Host as family rather than a threat. The system's explanation left Ryuk nodding. Looking to the side, he noticed the moonlight streaming through the room via the torn gaps in the metal walls. Unconsciously, he turned his gaze to the moon. The moonlight revealed his handsome white face marked by large eyes, a small nose, and full red lips. His face was dirt-covered with soot and ashes, but that only made him look even cuter, like someone who would never harm a chicken. I guess I'll have to wait till tomorrow, then, Ryuk mused, settling down on the iron bed. His eyes remained open for a while, the day's events replaying in his head, but he soon shut those thoughts down and forced himself to sleep. Soon, a gentle snore could be heard through the room, and the place descended into utter silence. How long will you keep running, little dark one? The voice echoed through a snowy world, one filled with pine trees that cast long, dark shadows on the ground. Through the forest, a snow-clad figure ran at full speed, breathing heavily, frost pouring in and out of his nose and lips with each breath. He had no idea why he was running, but faintly he felt terror behind him, a terror that prompted him to keep going. How long can you hide from us, little dark one? The voice came again, this time from his side. The figure immediately veered right, sprinting even faster. His foot slammed against a branch on the ground, causing him to fall. But he scrambled through the snow, quickly getting back to his feet and continuing his frantic escape. His eyes turned back to see what was behind him, but all he saw in the dark forest was a wall of shadows and hundreds of crimson pupils glistening at him. Their gaze radiated an intense bloodlust, making his hair stand on end. Instinctively, he sped forward blindly. You are cursed, and so is your fate. Nothing can escape that which is accursed, and you are its embodiment, little dark one. The voice resonated once more. The figure turned his head over his shoulder to see, only to find the wall of shadows and crimson pupils mere inches away. He unconsciously pushed himself harder. In the next instant, he felt the ground beneath his feet disappear. Looking down, he saw an endless abyss into which he began to fall. "No!" he screamed as he descended rapidly, the last thing he saw being the wall of shadows and crimson pupils. "No!" A scream reverberated through the room as a figure shot up into a sitting position. Ryuk's eyes flashed with an intense, weary light as he looked around, his chest heaving madly. Unconsciously, he glanced at his breath, noticing strange, snowy white smoke puffing out. "A bad dream, huh?" The thick voice resonated through the space, and Ryuk turned to see old Jack walking toward him with a tray in hand. Jack placed the tray on the table by the bed. Immediately, Ryuk jumped to his feet, grabbing the bread and stuffing it into his mouth while downing the coffee in quick gulps. "You haven't eaten any real food for almost a week now. I can understand how hungry your stomach worms are," old Jack said, watching Ryuk devour everything like a starving beast. Within 3 minutes, Ryuk was done. He wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and felt a little more alive. "So, what do you say, kid? You ready?" Ryuk rose from his bed, nodding with determination. "Good. Then come with me. It's still very early, and I want you to leave this place before too many people notice. The fewer who see you leaving, the safer you'll be," old Jack said, his words carrying an implication that made Ryuk's eyes flash. Together, they headed outside the room. "What are we even doing here?" The words, seemingly meant to be a whisper, echoed loudly through the heavy sandstorm. Their source was none other than a boy hiding under a dilapidated bridge, his face peeking out from the small space in front of him. Right in Ryuk's line of sight was none other than old Jack, draped in heavy dark coats. By his side was a large dark bag that seemed to be filled to the brim with something. Ryuk had no idea what could possibly be inside. Even though he had known old Jack since he was big enough to grab a knife, the current situation was freaking him out. Firstly, they had left the settlement about 5 hours ago. It had taken them exactly 2 hours of walking to get here, but since then old Jack had instructed him to get down below the bridge while he himself stood outside. Ryuk had listened, but after 3 hours of old Jack simply staring into the distance, things were starting to feel creepy. Besides, old Jack had a habit of smoking on his smoke stick every few minutes, something he even did while they were walking. It seemed to Ryuk like some kind of addiction. 3 hours since they had arrived here, and old Jack had not brought out his smoke stick. His expression was forced and determined, a hint of uncaringness covering his body. Something Ryuk knew was definitely fake, as old Jack never really had to pretend he wasn't caring about something. There was something wrong, and now Ryuk was starting to get really suspicious. "They're here," old Jack suddenly called out, and his eyes narrowed to look into the distance, where he was met with nothing but the endlessly blowing sandstorm. "And who are?" Ryuk was about to ask, but in the next instant, he felt a chill down his spine as he unconsciously ducked to the ground from sudden fear. A strange, beastly sound echoed from the distance, and soon it became clear to old Jack, whose eyes became even more steely. It was none other than a truck, large and advanced-looking, with an almost beast-like design that made it intimidating. The door to the vehicle opened up, and what followed was the sound of heavy stomping that threw rocks up from the ground. 2 men came out from the left and right sides of the vehicle, draped in long lab coats like those of scientists, and walked toward old Jack. "Jackie Jack, how you doing?" One of the men, green-haired, thin, and with a sunken face, said while waving his hand in the air as he walked toward old Jack. He had a smile of familiarity on his face that made him seem like an approachable gentleman, but his sunken face and narrow eyes that looked like those of a con artist, were sure to stir people away. Eventually, both men came to a stop exactly 10 meters away from old Jack. "Have the goods been prepared?" The other man, a thick, muscular figure whose arm veins bulged through his white lab coat, asked. He was dark-skinned, bald-headed, with pitch-black eyes and a sharp, elongated jaw. His face beheld a serious expression, and he seemed more like a soldier than a scientist. Bang! The sound came from old Jack dropping the bag right at the feet of the muscular man. A prolonged silence ensued, a staring contest exchanged between the man and old Jack. But it was eventually broken when the green-haired man bent to the ground on one knee and opened up the bag. Finally, Ryuk knew what was within, from the sudden amount of light that blossomed forth. A total of 200 F-grade cores and 50 E-grade cores. Old Jack's uninterested voice rang out, receiving a thoughtful hum from the muscular man. The green-haired man zipped back the bag and carried it up to his feet, while the muscular man dipped his hand into his lab coat before bringing out exactly 5 bags of coins. But Ryuk was shocked because the bags of coins weren't small bags at all. They were very large, almost thrice the size of one Ryuk had received from old Jack previously. He guessed each bag should hold around 1,000 star coins, if not more. As the soldier raised the coins into the air, he suddenly released them, causing the bags to drop back to the ground with a heavy bang. "There you go, old Jack," the muscular man said with a taunting smile. Ryuk instantly understood what was going on. The man was trying to have revenge. When old Jack had dropped the bag of cores, he had not passed it to them but thrown it at their feet. Now the man was also throwing the bags of coins, old Jack's payment, right before him. A petty man he is, Ryuk thought in his head. Surprisingly to both men, old Jack bent to the ground and picked up 3 of the bags of coins, leaving the remaining 2 on the ground. "Huh?" the green-haired man voiced out, looking at Jack with a weird gaze. This was something that had never happened before. Old Jack would normally haggle with them for the price not being enough, but this time he was letting 2 bags remain on the ground, a sign of not wanting them. Old Jack wasn't that kind of person, and he never had been. "Does this have something to do with that kid?" the muscular man suddenly asked, and immediately, Ryuk ducked down, his eyes widening. He found me." "How?" "I want you to take him back to the barracks," old Jack said, and the green-haired man scoffed with a bit of amused laughter. But his mirth stopped when he saw the serious expression on old Jack's face. You mean it?" the man asked in shock. "Fine," the muscular man said as he bent to the ground and picked up the 2 bags of coins, throwing them into his coat. "But if he gets there and gets killed for trespassing or anything, it won't be our fault." "I agree," old Jack replied. "Well then, it's settled. Better catch up, scrawny." The voice came from the muscular man turning away and heading back to the armored beast, followed closely by the green-haired man. "Come out, bloody mutt," old Jack commanded as Ryuk finally jumped out from the bridge, carrying his backpack. Arriving before old Jack, Ryuk inhaled deeply, feeling his spine tingle at the sight of the beast, which was just a truck. It seemed old Jack had noticed that too. "Bob really never taught you anything, did he?" he said with a sigh. "I thought we were walking to the barracks. Isn't it just a few miles from here?" Ryuk asked cautiously as old Jack shook his head. "It's safer to go with them. Don't worry. They won't dare try anything with you on the way. Once you get to the barracks, you know what to do, right?" old Jack said, and Ryuk nodded. "Good. Now keep going already. They're not very good with patience," old Jack said, hushing Ryuk away. But Ryuk remained unmoving, speechless and surprised. Old Jack had given him too much. He had rescued him from the explosion that threw him away. He had brought him to his own house, clothed him, and given him a card that was as valuable as a ticket to a prison that could never be escaped. And now, he had paid the least of 2,000 star coins just to make sure Ryuk arrived safely at the Apex barracks. How could he just turn back now and simply walk away? No need to get emotional," Ryuk? Old Jack said as he brought out his smoking pipe, got on one knee, and stared hard at Ryuk, placing firm hands on his shoulders. If you really want to thank me, then come back and exchange that Null's core on my table. I'll take that as a good price for my help, Old Jack said with the same greedy smile Ryuk himself often had. Ryuk couldn't help but give a firm nod. Old Jack was right. Only the core of such a creature was enough to repay what Old Jack had done for him. I'll be back, Old Jack. I swear it on Uncle Bob, Ryuk promised. I am. I am. The sound of the horn rang out as Old Jack tapped him twice on the shoulder. That's the spirit, bloody mutt. Now run along, he said, nudging him. Ryuk slowly backed off, and just when Old Jack let down his guard, Ryuk closed in and gave the man a big, warm hug. This might very well be his last meeting with Old Jack. One thing he was sure of was that he would miss the man, a lot. The hug lasted for a few seconds, with Old Jack ruffling his dusty white hair before Ryuk parted and disappeared into the armored beast. With accelerating speed, the car tore off, taking Ryuk into the distance, and Old Jack watched silently as it fully disappeared. Slowly, his hands began quivering, and then drop. It was the sound of his smoke stick hitting the ground. Yet Old Jack paid it no attention, simply looking at where Ryuk had gone. Don't fall, bloody mutt. In the foggy desert, caked with powerful sandstorms raging through the area, a large truck tore through the fog like a knife through butter, speeding up with incredible velocity. Everything, even stones and rocks, was flattened to pieces in its path as the truck rampaged through like a wild beast, heading toward an unknown destination. Within the truck, there was a group of 3. 2 of them were seated at the front of the vehicle, while Ryuk occupied the wide seat at the back. Right now, all Ryuk could see wasn't the endless plains through the window but memories of Old Jack. His uncle had always been a very quiet man who rarely spoke with others back in the settlement. Even if someone greeted him, his uncle wouldn't answer. Ryuk had noticed that most people seemed to steer clear of his uncle any time he came out, which was rare in and of itself since his uncle barely left the house. But if there was a single person Ryuk knew who could interact well with his uncle and draw a chuckle from him, it would be Old Jack. That was why Old Jack had been like a second father to Ryuk, and he was the only second person Ryuk trusted in the world after Uncle Bob. He had been very kind to him, and while there was no doubt he was a stingy old bastard, Ryuk still felt a pang of pain in his heart for leaving him behind. I'll kill that Null and bring back its core. Then I'll get to take revenge for Uncle Bob and also reunite with Old Jack. I just need to improve my strength as quickly as possible, Ryuk confirmed silently to himself, taking a deep breath and clearing the nostalgia from his head. Only then did he feel the connection to the real world return. Right now, the 2 men in the front seat seemed to be discussing an issue. He decided to eavesdrop, pretending to stare blankly at the sandstorm in the distance. You hear the rumors, Vandal? The green-haired man said while driving the car, giving a side glance to the muscular man, who simply hummed in response. Some of the soldiers said that an important guest would be coming to the barracks. They said it's a very high-ranking family from a Grade B city too. A guest from a Grade B city? Vandal repeated with furrowed brows. Shocking, isn't it? It's been years since we had such a visit. I can't even remember what those pompous bastards from higher-grade cities look like. And besides, I heard they might not even be humans. They might be from the Vampiro family instead. Vampires, huh? Vandal said, his gaze narrowing further. Just why would such a high-ranking family visit our barracks? Vandal mused silently but loud enough for Ryuk to hear, and obviously the same for Enoch, the green-haired man. What reason could it be, if not to suck every ounce of blood from that bull body of yours? Muhahaha. That's an expensive joke, Vandal said seriously. Anything to make your hair stand on end. Ha ha ha. Vampires. All that Ryuk knew about vampires was that they sucked the blood of humans and were intensely evil. That's all he had ever heard, and of course, everything came from him sneaking information from the other core hunters. When he had asked about them from his uncle, All he had gotten was an uncaring shrug. Something his uncle did for questions he didn't find worthy enough of an answer. But to Ryuk, right now, his blood unconsciously flowed faster. It would be a lie to say he wasn't curious about seeing other races that existed on Endearth. So, hey kid. The call suddenly disrupted Ryuk's train of thought, and he turned to the front, where the side face of the green-haired man could be seen through the small square-shaped glass that Ryuk could barely see through. So tell me, what is your relationship with Jackie Jack? The man suddenly asked, curiosity shining in his sunken green eyes, and Ryuk simply replied, "He's a core trader, and I'm a hunter," he replied. "You? A hunter? Ha 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 ha." Enoch laughed aloud from Ryuk's reply, and even the muscular man turned to look at him through the mirror at the top of the truck's decking. "So you're a hunter? Yeah, right? So what do you hunt?" Enoch pressed. "Cores," he replied. "Cores? I thought they were called mutant beasts." Enoch asked with a raised eyebrow, and Ryuk shrugged. "What's the difference? I guess you have a point. So tell me, what is the highest power level of a beast you've ever hunted?" Enoch asked curiously. "F grade," Ryuk replied confidently, and Enoch burst into loud laughter, wheezing behind the steering wheel. Even Vandal turned to look at the boy once more, this time with a raised eyebrow. His words were brimming with confidence, almost like he was some genius from one of those pompous higher cities, yet all he had ever hunted was an F-grade beast. A beast so low in the rankings that some didn't even include it at all for being too weak. An F-grade is the highest beast you've ever hunted? For real, kid? Yes, Ryuk said, and the man stared at his face for a while through the glass at the upper front deck of the vehicle before shaking his head. "Do you know, kid, that right now, you might be the weakest piece of shit in the entire universe? Even 5-year-old kids from grade C cities have no problem pummeling an F-grade beast to death. And what age are you? I'm guessing something around 17 or 18, no?" "Aha," Ryuk replied. He wasn't interested at all in telling the people any truth about himself. Those from the barracks weren't exactly friends to them in the settlement. Even old Jack didn't seem to fancy these men. So why would Ryuk try to curry favor with them? "You won't survive." The thick voice boomed through the van as Ryuk turned his head only to find the muscular man looking directly at him with a piercing, emotionless gaze. "Even if you're as strong as an E-grade, you still won't survive. I can't sense an ounce of apex energy on you, so I can guess you're only still an ordinary human. It might even be a miracle you can go up against mutant beasts at all, but in the end, you'll die once you reach the outer world. Even a casual release of power from a D-grade might be enough to turn you into mush," Vandal said, and by his serious expression, Ryuk couldn't sense an ounce of funny humor in his words. What he was confused by was why the man bothered to help him. "I know old Jack very well, and never once has he asked for a favor or made a deal with us. He's usually very disdainful. Today he was different, almost like he lowered his pride, something impossible for someone like old Jack to do. And that reason I can guess is solely because of you. He values you enough to put down his pride just to make sure of your safety. I'm guessing whoever you are or whatever your relationship with him is, he probably wants you to survive, or there'll be nothing remaining after your death. If you go out with that baseless confidence of yours, you'll be dying sooner than you think," Vandal concluded before he turned his gaze away from Ryuk and looked at the side glass, staring at the endless desert. "You know Vandal is right, kid," Enoch said, his voice softening the intense pressure that Vandal's speech brought. "But you don't need to piss your pants. You'll survive so long as you follow the rule of survival. Do you know what the rule of survival states, kiddo?" Enoch said with a nauseating smile that spread to his ears as Ryuk turned to look at him, his heart skipping a beat from the man's sinister expression. The rule of survival is really simple, kiddo. In this forsaken world called Endearth, only 2 groups of people survive: the strong and the weak flatterers. The really strong people own Endearth, coming from families with deep history and greater knowledge of apex energy, or powerful racial bloodlines. They're free to act as they like, and pride is rightfully entitled to their name. As for the weak, only those with a good tongue survive, those who know well how let down their pride and dignity and kowtow to the strong, flattering them even as they pee on their heads, Enoch said with a sarcastic expression that made Ryuk raise an eyebrow. It was the first time he was hearing such a twisted rule. And you know what you should worry about now? Enoch said, drawing Ryuk's attention once more. Just what category do you belong to? In the world of Endeath, there were a total of 5 cities, each rated with the grade allotted to the mutant beast creatures. Grade A, Grade B, Grade C, Grade D, and finally Grade E, which was the place Ryuk lived. In Grade E, moving to other cities was banned. One could only move from other cities to Grade E, but not the other way around. This had made most of Grade E's inhabitants refer to it as a prison. The conditions of Grade E were, of course, the absolute lowest. However, if there was one good thing about Grade E, it would be the almost complete absence of civil law. One couldn't be arrested in Grade E. Most crimes committed were petty ones, such as stealing others' cores, but if caught doing that close to the core exchange center, one would only receive a beating before being let go. The Apex soldiers never came to arrest anyone at all. That was why most people came to Grade East in the first place, and why Grade E was such a bad place. The majority of its inhabitants were those who had committed grave crimes and fled to Grade E to avoid ever getting arrested. But running to Grade E also meant never leaving, which was why the Apex organizations were probably satisfied with not arresting a criminal who sheltered themselves there. It was an equal sentencing to life imprisonment. Despite this, the existence of the Apex soldiers was known throughout the world, and Grade E was no exception. Even though most inhabitants had never actually seen an Apex soldier, because they never really came into the settlements, everyone knew where the Apex soldiers stayed, the Apex barracks. Right now, Ryuk, through the small rectangular glass in front of him, could see part of the gigantic wall that stretched into the distance as far as the eye could see. Looking at how it disappeared into the horizon, he could only think of one hypothesis. The whole of Grade E had a wall barricade around it? That was the only explanation. His attention was diverted as he saw the large gate painted white and blue. At the sides of the gates were large walls, where some soldiers, donned in their uniforms, could be seen standing. They had serious expressions on their faces as they looked at the approaching vehicle. Stop at the post and identify yourself and what base regime you are on. The loud voice came barreling toward the truck as Enoch's eyes narrowed. Such a thing as stopping and identifying oneself was basic protocol, but it was something rarely observed by them. In fact, it had been years since it was observed, as everyone knew no one from the settlement ever approached the gate. Only the Apex soldiers did. Yet, here they were being asked to identify. This could only mean one thing. Those vampires really came, and it seems they're pretty good at bossing people around, or the damn Apex captains are trying to bootlick them, Enoch said with a scoff as he soon stopped the truck and got down. Dipping his hand into his lap coat, he brought out a card. A beam of light came forth from the top of the wall, held by a strange nozzle-like weapon. The light shone on the card. The scene of shining light on the card continued for about 10 seconds before the light stopped, and the soldier atop the wall dipped the light weapon back into his pockets.
Groom.
What followed was the sound of the large blue and white gate opening up. The truck slowly entered as the gate once more came to a close. Now that they were truly within the gate, Ryuk could clearly see the Apex barracks, and he couldn't help but be surprised. Before him were various towering structures that seemed like giants, sleek and covered in this glistening, glowing metal he had never seen before. The ground they were moving on wasn't covered with sand, but with granite and well-smoothed cement. It was the first time in his life that Ryuk had ever seen fully granite flooring, with no cracks or gaps at all. The same couldn't be said for back in the settlement, where the ground seemed to have been blown up by some kind of bomb, revealing the sand beneath. If what you said earlier was true, then that building with that emblem should be the place where you have to go to get the access, the muscular soldier said to Ryuk as they got down from the truck. He pointed into the distance, where the largest building in the entire barracks could be seen. There was a gigantic logo of red and blue wings, along with a sword running down between the two wings. It was the logo of the Apex soldiers, and it really was a beautiful one. "Thank you," Ryuk said to the muscular man before turning and walking off into the distance under the gaze of the two men who watched the scrawny-looking, dirty kid disappear. Scrawny-looking, unkempt, naive, and real dumb. He's everything negative, just like the slummy area where he comes from, Enoch said with a chuckle as they watched Ryuk disappear. At least he has some self-consciousness and a bit of guts. As for how long he can keep that up, that's another question for the day. What about you, Vandal? What do you think of him? Enoch asked curiously as he turned to look at Vandal, who stared at Ryuk disappearing into the distance before taking his gaze away and walking in the opposite direction. Hey, wait for me. I asked you a question, you damn bull! Enoch shouted in anger as Vandal ignored him. Grabbing his bag, he chased after the figure of Vandal, who didn't seem to care at all. Their argument spread into the distance before eventually disappearing, the last thing coming out of Vandal's lips being, "We've already helped him safely to the barracks. Whether he lives or dies is no longer our concern, so I don't care about him anymore." Appearing before the gargantuan building with the words, "Apex Operations Hall," inscribed on it, Ryuk unconsciously felt his heart slam hard against his ribcage. The mere presence of the structure felt like standing before a titan, and he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed by the pressure. Eventually, he mustered the courage to go in, spurred by the multiplying gazes directed his way. Entering through the heavy glass structure, it naturally slid open for him as he stepped inside. Yet, the sights within made his bag slip from his hand, his jaw dropping to the ground. Beautiful? No. Beautiful couldn't begin to describe it. It was absolutely and breathtakingly gorgeous. The room he had entered was gigantic, and the air within was incredibly strange. He felt as if someone was warmly massaging his body and nostrils, making him feel both invigorated and relaxed. The pure, unblemished white light, coupled with the immaculate cleanliness of the hall, left him frozen in place. Quickly, he reined himself in, picked up his backpack, and looked forward. Ahead of him was a group of male and female Apex soldiers, some typing rapidly on keyboards in front of them. This should be the receptionists, Ryuk thought to himself as he walked towards one of the female soldiers, who seemed to be lazily scrolling through a screen instead of typing. She was the first to notice Ryuk, raising an eyebrow as she looked him up and down. He looked like he had just been dragged out of a gutter, with faded clothes, a dirty face bearing dark ink marks, and brown hair speckled with white that obscured its true color. "And who are you? Did you lose your way? How did you get into the base?" A flurry of questions assaulted Ryuk as he arrived before the fierce-looking woman, whose gaze held unfiltered disgust for him. Yet he wasn't bothered in the slightest. He had heard plenty of tales about the pompous soldiers from the barracks and knew better to be easily offended by one. Without a word, he pulled a card from his coat and placed it on her desk. Jennifer's eyes narrowed at Ryuk's calm and collected expression. That alone was enough for her to realize he wasn't lost and knew exactly why he was here, or at least what he was doing. Eventually, she redirected her attention to the card. At first glance, it didn't seem remarkable, but as she picked it up and felt its texture, her fingers twitched. She flicked the card over and her eyes widened in shock. She looked back and forth between the card and Ryuk 3 times before taking a deep breath, swiping the card on a device at the side. A soft beep echoed before she began typing furiously on her keyboard. Her eyes dilated in surprise again, and she quickly grabbed a telephone at her side, dialing a number. A strange glass-like light appeared before her and Ryuk, blocking him from hearing any sound. After a brief exchange, the call ended, and the woman replaced the telephone. She handed the card back to Ryuk, who accepted it without a word. "Take that elevator, sir, and input the number 3. There you'll reach the 3rd floor. Look for room number 0 at the end of the hall," she said with newfound respect. Her tone completely changed. Even the way she addressed him, with "sir," was drastically different. Of course, Ryuk's expression remained impassive. He gave a simple nod, slipping the card back into his pocket before heading toward the elevator. "Just what did you give to me, old Jack?" he silently wondered as he stepped into the elevator. There was already a panel of buttons at the side, and Ryuk pressed the number 3. Ding! A soft chime echoed as the elevator doors closed. Immediately, Ryuk felt a faint vibration beneath his feet, realizing he was being carried upward even though everything seemed motionless. So, this is the elevator they talked about. How interesting, he mused, unknowingly straightening his posture and putting on a pompous expression. It was his first time in an elevator, and he couldn't help but feel like he had suddenly become more important. After about 15 seconds, the vibration ceased. The elevator doors opened, and Ryuk stepped out. Before him stretched a long, narrow hall with several blocks and corners along the sides, each marked with various numbers. Ryuk quickly deduced the descending order of the numbers, realizing that room 0 would be at the very end. Without hesitation, he began walking forward. Along the way, he couldn't help but marvel at the intricate design of the doors, the strange tiled patterns on the walls, and the seamless flooring. However, his admiration was cut short when he felt a sharp pain slam into his head, sending him crashing to the ground. Arf! Gasp! Are you blind? The words were like the screech of a banshee, slamming into Ryuk's ears as he held onto his forehead, which was burning with pain. He raised his head to look at the figure before him, but his expression quickly dropped. The person before him was just a girl around his age, with long crimson-red hair that reached down to her waist and poured around her body, along with piercing red eyes and pointed elf-like ears. Her appearance brought quite a bit of shock to Ryuk, but his mind was quickly brought back to reality as he snorted coldly. What do you mean? Am I blind? You were the one who knocked into me. You blind piece of red shit. Ryuk cursed while scoffing at the girl like she was an idiot. Turning his head to the side, he noticed his bag and the card given to him lying on the ground. He instinctively stretched out his hand to retrieve them, but it was grabbed tightly by a pair of snowy white hands, cold as ice. With a raised eyebrow, Ryuk turned to look at the source of the hand. It was none other than the girl, whose eyes were flashing with an intense crimson light that sent a chill down his spine. What did you just call me, you lowlife? The girl said, her words dripping with disbelief. But Ryuk pressed down the fear he got from the crimson eyes and responded, Get your damn hand off me, blind piece of red shit. He snapped back with clarity, but the view before him abruptly changed. All he felt was his entire body weight fading into thin air, followed by a rapid whoosh. Bang! A thunderous crash resounded through the hall as the lights flickered. A world of pain slammed into Ryuk's back, emanating from his spine as he felt himself hit the wall. His body slid off it, but before he could touch the ground, something moved with speed. It was heading toward Ryuk's neck, and he instinctively moved his head to the side, dodging the red claw's grip. But his relief was short-lived. The red-clawed hand latched onto his neck, pinning him against the wall. The grip tightened with each passing second. But I dodged it, he screamed internally, his head raising to meet the blood-crimson eyes staring at him with incredible bloodlust, accompanied by an amused smirk. How is she so strong? Ryuk thought, panic flooding his mind. At that moment, his feet dangled in the air. He felt his strength leaving his body. No matter how much he struggled, he couldn't move a single arm. His body wouldn't budge at all under the immense power holding his neck. Not even the fight with the E-grade mutated rat made him feel like this. That means the small girl in front of him, barely his age, was stronger than the mutated rat. At least twice stronger. Call yourself a dirty piece of shit and lick my boots, and maybe then I'll be merciful and not break your neck, the girl said, her words venomous and her tone mocking. Ryuk felt himself regaining the power of speech through the unbearable pain assaulting his body. Clenching his teeth tightly, he opened his mouth and spat out, You bastard! Then die, then? The girl hissed with ridicule, her second hand expanding and forming into a claw. It was soon covered by a red aura, elongating her fingers. Veins bulged under her skin, and her hand turned even paler as she prepared to swipe at Ryuk's neck. That's enough, Valora. The calm, gentle voice echoed from behind, stopping Valora mere seconds before she could take the swipe and end Ryuk's life. Her head turned behind her, eyebrows raised, to find two men walking toward her. Humph! She harumphed coldly, releasing her grip. Ryuk fell to the ground, collapsing onto one knee. Cough! 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 A fit of coughing rang through the hall as Ryuk gasped for air, feeling it return to his lungs. Causing trouble again, Valora? The masculine voice came with a chuckle. Ryuk finally regained himself, raising his head to meet the speaker. He saw a man bending down to pick up the card old Jack had given him. The man murmured, rotating the card in his calloused palms. Is that? The second man beside him asked, looking at the card with curiosity. For some reason, he bore the same red hair and eyes as Valora, and Ryuk could easily deduce they were related. A VIP card of the fallen family, the first man whispered, both their eyes narrowing in suspicion as they turned to look at Ryuk. The man who picked up the card was middle-aged, with piercing dark eyes and short, sleek black hair. He wore a dark suit that concealed his muscular frame well, and he was tall, very tall, around 1.9 meters. The other man, with red hair, was equally tall, albeit leaner. Both men studied Ryuk as he slowly rose to his feet. Are you the one asked to come to the office? The black-haired man asked. Ryuk looked past him to the room labeled 0 just behind them. It was safe to say one of them was the person he was meant to meet. Yes, I am. And why would a boy barely 18 years old, with no cultivation and apparently from the slum area of Grady City, have the VIP card of the devilish fallen family? Valora asked, her disbelieving shock and doubtful gaze evident as she stared at Ryuk. She had heard the men's conversation, and the name of the card left her more than surprised. We need to have a talk, the dark-haired man said, picking up Ryuk's bag and the card before heading toward room 0. Ryuk followed after him, giving Valora a poker-faced glance before stepping into the room. The door shut behind them with a bang, leaving Valora outside. She scoffed in annoyance, walking toward the door and reaching for the knob. However, her hand withdrew violently mere inch from it like one electrocuted. Her teeth bared in frustration. Damn it! To start with, I need to know what exactly it is that you know about this card. The question gently echoed through the lush office, where a total of 3 people sat, separated by a pristine white desk. 2 of them sat at opposite ends of the elaborate table, and 1 sat in front of them, much smaller and none other than Ryuk. The men before him were the very individuals who currently wore serious expressions on their faces. Right now, Ryuk felt a strange hallucination. It was as if the gravity in the room had doubled, and even the air seemed to have stopped flowing. Warning! A condensing aura has been targeted on host. Danger! 10% chance of causing harm to host's life. Percentage is increasing with every passing second. The golden notification panel suddenly appeared before Ryuk, blinking in and out with dangerous, flashing lights. Only now was Ryuk aware of the danger he was in. The 2 people in front of him were the ones responsible for the pressure, and he doubted it would take much for them to eliminate him. There was no way out of the room, and he was sure he'd be done for before he could even take a single step. He had seen what that little girl outside was capable of. Surely, these men couldn't be weaker than her, or she wouldn't have bothered to listen to them. Perhaps it would do him good to avoid playing any games and answer them as truthfully as possible. There would be no revenge of any kind if he ended up dying here. It's a long story. Are you sure you have the patience for it? Ryuk asked both men. The red-haired man chuckled before grabbing the card from the table. It seems we're the ones who need to remind you just how precarious a situation you're in right now. Starting with the origin of this card, the man continued, his tone growing serious. As you might already know, there are cities, a total of 5, and each of them is run by powerhouses commonly referred to as families, with the exception of the lawless area, which we call Grade E. This card that you hold right here belongs to one of the top 10 most mighty families in Grade B, the second highest city in terms of pure might and power. That family is none other than the Fallen family, and they are powerful enough to raise the entirety of Grade E to nothing before tomorrow morning if they so wish, easily wiping an entire grade out of existence. How many people live in that slum area you come from? How many mutant beasts lay within? Imagine all those lives gone in a blink. This is the power that the fallen family, the owners of this card, possess. Their symbol is the wing planted down with the swords. The man explained lengthily, tapping the symbol on the card for Ryuk to see. His eyes narrowed as he finally recognized the strange emblem. And mind you, there are a total of 3 types of cards issued by the Fallens. Anyone possessing this card can ask for help based on the power level of the card given. This card is one of the 3 most powerful cards ever issued by them. It forces them to obey a certain single wish of whoever possesses it and grants you access to one of the mightiest powerhouses of the Fallen family in their own base in Grade B. Imagine such power in a simple card. And you, a kid from the slums of Grade E, possess it. So, if you ask me whether I'm willing to take a few hours listening to how such power got into the hands of a Grade E kid, then of course I'm in. Ryuk took a deep breath. The information he had just been given shook him. He didn't know how that stingy old bastard had gotten his hands on such a thing, but lying now would bring him possible death. Ryuk decided to come as clean as he could. 30 minutes passed. And that is how I got in here after receiving the card. Do you understand now? Ryuk concluded with a big exhale, watching both men narrow their eyes dangerously at him. Both shifted in their seats as if questions lingered in their minds. The dark-haired man was the first to speak. This man you speak of, the one who gave you the card. Old Jack. Ryuk completed and the man nodded. Right, Old Jack. Do you perhaps know what his full name could be? Or should I say, his surname? Jack what? The man asked. Ryuk shook his head. I'm afraid I don't. I only know him as Old Jack. That's what everyone calls him. He replied with a shrug, and the red-haired man stood up before turning to the dark-haired man. A good coincidence. Wouldn't you agree, Captain Dalmian? Since we just ended our meeting and will be heading back to Grade B, why not leave us the headache of getting the boy to meet with the Fallen family? I'll help you drop him at their front gate. You can count that as a thank you from the Vampiro family for the secret information you've provided us. The red-haired man bowed slightly as Captain Dalmian's eyes flashed with reluctance for a split second before he eventually nodded. How can I refuse help from one of the Vampiro family? If it pleases you, you can help the boy out. My sincere thanks to the Vampiro family, Captain Dalmian said, and the red-haired man nodded. Very well then, Captain Dalmian. We'll be on our way. No need to trouble yourself with escorting. The red-haired man grabbed the card from the table and moved to Ryuk's side. Pick up your bag. I'll be doing you a favor and dropping you where you need to be next. The man said, and Ryuk robotically obeyed, picking up his bag from the table and following him. The office was reduced to silence, leaving only Captain Dalmian, who collapsed into his seat after the two left. Yet he soon sat back up, furrowing his brows. Old Jack. Old Jack, Dalmian mumbled, trying to find some connection before his eyes widened in realization. Jack Fallen? The mad genius of the Fallen family who was declared dead 50 years ago. Could he be the one? But why would the Fallen family lie about their top 3 genius suddenly dying to the whole world? And why would one of the most talented geniuses of Endearth be a core seller in the slums of Endearth? I am the Lion Ravencroft. You can refer to me as Duke the Lion. The red-haired man introduced himself, giving a side glance to Ryuk, who turned to look into the man's crimson eyes before nodding his head. Ryuk. Ryuk introduced simply. Ryuk. A short and interesting name. Well, Ryuk, I came to Grade E with a very important mission, which I have already resolved, and was preparing to move back when we received your call. Since we've finished our business and are also returning to Grade B, I thought it would be best if we could help drop you at the grounds of the Fallen family. I hope you're not against this idea? Duke the Lion said. Ryuk vehemently shook his head. No, it's fine. Thank you for extending a helping hand, Ryuk replied. If even the captain of an entire Apex barracks is unwilling to refuse you of a request, then I will be stupid to think I have a choice. He silently thought right after. It's nothing, the Duke said, waving him off casually with a small laugh as they both traveled to the elevator. The Lion pressed a button under the elevator panel, rapidly whooshing them downward. In the elevator, A couple of thoughts were running through Ryuk's head. He refers to himself as Duke, and during the meeting, a captain who rules over the entire Grade E Apex Soldier Battalion seemed afraid of displeasing him and agreed to everything he said. That means this man must be quite a high-profile vampire. Right now, I am nothing but some slummy kid from Grade E, yet he treats me with respect. This is not due to his love for me, but the respect toward the card I possess. For now, I'm viewed as a person only because of that card. If that was taken away from me right now, then I would be viewed as something less than an existence. That's something bound to happen once I use up the card's requests. D-I-I-N-G. The noise of the elevator awoke him as they got out, and the first thing that welcomed them was the sight of the red-haired girl who had her chest puffed up and clear annoyance written all over her face. "You abandoned me!" The girl barked out at Duke the Lion, who never lost his small, respectful smile. But before he could answer, Ryuk felt her disgusted gaze directed toward him. "And why is this blind creep still here?" she asked. "I'm sorry if I made you feel that way, but please do refrain from referring to him as such. Right now, he is an important guest of our Vampiro family, one whose favor would be better cherished than annoyance." "I hope you understand, young mistress," Duke the Lion said, with a bit of seriousness in his voice. This seemed to bring slight surprise to the pompous red-haired girl as she scanned Ryuk from head to toe before humming. "Like I care. We're leaving now," she said before storming toward the entrance, barging through the glass and disappearing outside. "Please do not be offended, Ryuk," Duke the Lion apologized, but Ryuk shrugged his shoulders, moving on almost as if he couldn't even be bothered at all. Together, they moved out of the place and soon arrived outside, where a large plane was already waiting for them. Once more, Ryuk was starstruck by the design of the craft and watched as its hatch opened, spearing out stairs. But even more shocking was when the red-haired girl jumped into the air, ignoring the steps. Ryuk watched as she rapidly moved 30 meters into the air and disappeared into the craft. Just how strong is she? He couldn't help but wonder. "This way, Ryuk," Duke the Lion said as he climbed up the stairs, and Ryuk followed after him. If he had also needed to jump such a height, he would have ended up embarrassing himself, as he really wasn't capable of such a feat. The three disappeared into the ship, which immediately rose into the air, ascending higher and higher before it zoomed forward with a speed that caused white rings to appear in the air, fading into the distance. At the top of the largest base in the barracks, a man stood, his hair flapping wildly in the wind, scattered by the turbulent wave. "They're finally gone," Captain Dalmian said with an exhale of relief, but soon his expression settled as he looked toward where the ship disappeared. "It would probably be best if the higher-ups became aware of the existence of a new cardholder of the fallen family," he said, dipping his hand into his pocket and bringing out a communication device, soon dialing a number. "Hello. This is Captain Dalmian of Grade E Barracks. I would like to speak to the commander in charge about an anomalous situation, and I deem my message of 3-star importance." "Hold on a second, and we'll get you across," came the reply,